Hello everyone, before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now let's begin. I've worked in the records department of St. Albrecht Hospital for just over 20 years. That sounds like a long time, and it is. Long enough to see the entire West Wing get demolished. Long enough to watch nurses retire and patients return decades later as doctors. I've always worked the night shift. Fewer distractions, fewer people breathing down your neck. It's just me, a thermos of bitter coffee, and miles of files, both digital and physical, stacked in stale gray filing cabinets. That part of the hospital hasn't changed much. The lights overhead buzz a little louder at night. The walls feel like they hold in the cold longer. And even though we upgraded to electronic systems 10 years ago, we still keep the old paperwork, just in case. I handle all of it. I know which patient was transferred where, who coded in which room, and who signed off on what. If something exists in this hospital, I can find it. So when the woman came in, for the 4th year in a row, I knew her face before she even said her name. She always came in during the same week, every year, pale, polite, and distant. The kind of quiet that sets your nerves on edge because you can tell she's rehearsed every word she's about to say. Her name was Amanda. She always asked for the same thing, her daughter's birth certificate. She'd give me the exact date, down to the hour, July 11th, 2007, room 423, born at 2:42 a.m. She remembered it like a prayer, a cold night, summer thunder rumbling in the distance, the nurses' faces. She said her daughter's name was Lila. But the problem was, there was no Lila, not in 2007, not ever. Every year I'd look just to make sure, every year. The same result. No file, no birth log, no mother named Amanda delivering a child. Room 423 had been empty for 2 days before and after that date. She'd leave quietly, every time, but she never seemed surprised. The 4th time she came in, something was different. She didn't ask right away. She stood at the counter longer than usual, her eyes scanning the walls like she expected something to change. She looked tired, more than tired, hollow, like she hadn't slept in days. "I brought something," she said softly. She reached into her purse and unfolded a paper that looked like it had been folded and unfolded 100 times. It was a photograph, worn at the edges, color fading. It showed a newborn, wrapped in a pink blanket, eyes closed. Next to her was Amanda, unmistakably younger, smiling but exhausted. Her hair was matted with sweat. A nurse stood in the background, blurred. "She was born here," Amanda whispered. "You can't tell me otherwise." I took the photo. Something about it chilled me. I've seen a lot of medical photos. This one looked real. The angle was the same as the ones our staff usually take for first-time mothers, the same soft flash, the same hospital tags, except I couldn't see the bracelet on the baby's wrist clearly. The date stamp at the bottom corner was smudged. It just said Jewel 7. The day was gone. Still, I tried. I ran the name, her date of birth, even cross-referenced room 423 with admission logs. Nothing. I checked the backup tapes, the logbooks from storage, even the old delivery room sign-ins. That room had been unused the entire week of July 2007. I told her that, gently. She didn't get angry. She didn't cry. She just looked me in the eyes and said, "But I remember the scream. I remember holding her. I remember watching the doctor cut the cord. I remember the smell of her skin." I wanted to believe her. That night, long after she left, I stayed in the archives. Something was bothering me. Something I couldn't name. At 3:17 a.m., the old database system pinged. An auto-restore flag had been triggered, something that should have been impossible. File 78493B, Lila Marie. Birth date, July 11th, 2007. Then it vanished. I didn't sleep that morning. I sat staring at my monitor long after the screen went dark. That file, the one that blinked into existence and disappeared, I searched for hours afterward. Rebuilt the cache, rechecked the logs, nothing. No trace of it, not even in the shadow directories our system automatically writes to during edits. It was as if it had never existed, or only existed for me. I even printed the temporary screen grab, just in time. I've got it locked in my bottom drawer, but no one else I've shown it to believes it's real. The birth date and name are clear, but there's no staff ID, no physician signature, no ward code. Like someone started creating a birth record, but didn't finish, or change their mind. When Amanda came back the next year, I couldn't bring myself to tell her about the file. She looked thinner, more fragile, like time was erasing her from the inside out. I handed her the same answer I always had. "I'm sorry, we don't have any records under that name." She nodded like she expected it. like some part of her already knew the truth. Not that her daughter didn't exist, but that she existed only in one version of reality, hers. The Mandela Effect, that's what they call it now. I didn't have a name for it back then, I just thought I was losing my mind. But since that night, I've started to notice it more. Little fractures in the files, records half-saved, details that flicker and vanish when you look too closely. I've stopped trying to explain them. Some nights, when I'm in the basement archive alone, I still feel a presence, like someone small is standing behind me. No footsteps, no breath, just warmth, like a body too close. And on. Say, just once, I thought I heard it, a newborn's cry. Soft, brief, familiar, but when I turned around, there was nothing, just a flickering light, and the silence of a room that never held a child. There are floors in this hospital no one likes to talk about. The 6th floor is one of them. It's not haunted exactly, not in the way people usually mean. No stories of bloody footsteps or patients screaming through the walls. It's just strange, forgotten, cold even in summer. It smells faintly like ammonia and something older, like wet stone or mold behind wallpaper. Most people don't even realize the 6th floor exists, especially newer staff. It's not listed on the main elevator panel unless you turn a physical key. That key only exists in maintenance and records, and I've had access to it since 2009. Back when we still used paper files, I used to walk the floors and collect end-of-day folders stored in carts outside patient rooms. Most nights, my rounds were routine. Quiet hallways, the sound of mops echoing, maybe a nurse humming down the hall. But the 6th floor was always different. There was one room I remember most, room 609, tucked at the very end of the north hallway, just past the fire doors. I knew that room, processed at least a dozen discharge forms from there over the years. I could describe its wallpaper pattern, the slow, uneven swing of the ceiling fan, the rusty label holder on the door with the numbers slightly crooked. Patients didn't stay there long. Most of them transferred out within a day or two. No complaints, just quick turnover. Nurses often avoided it. I'd once heard one mutter under her breath, "I hate that room. Always feel like I'm being watched in there." Then one night, a few years ago, I was assigned to digitize old floor maps and occupancy logs. The 6th floor layout popped up. I scanned it twice. There was no room 609. According to the official plans and the live patient system, the 6th floor ended at room 608. The hallway I remembered didn't exist. There was no north wing, no fire doors, nothing. I thought it was a clerical error, maybe an outdated blueprint. But then I checked the newer maps, then the oldest ones, then the construction files. Room 609 had never existed. That discovery didn't sit right with me. I knew what I'd seen, and not just once. Room 609 wasn't some vague memory from years ago. I had filed paperwork from it. I had wheeled carts of patient charts out of it. I had spoken to people in that room. But now, it was like it had been wiped from existence. I couldn't let it go. A few nights later, after most of the hospital had gone quiet, I took the service elevator up to the 6th floor. I used the old key to unlock the control panel, a trick I hadn't used in years. The floor was empty, just like I remembered. Lights buzzing faintly. A stale, almost metallic smell hung in the air, the kind of smell that settles in old places no one visits anymore. I walked the hallway slowly, counting room numbers. 601, 602, 603, all the way up to 608, then a blank stretch of wall. Where room 609 should have been, there was nothing, just a flat section of drywall with no number, no door frame, no visible seams. But I swear to you, I could feel the shape of the door that used to be there. I pressed my hand to the wall. It felt different from the rest of the corridor. Colder, more brittle, like the wall was thinner here, like something hollow waited behind it. I leaned in close, listening, my palm flat, and I heard it. Breathing, shallow, rhythmic, mechanical, like a patient hooked to a ventilator. I stumbled back. The hall was empty. I checked again. The sound was gone. The next day, I pulled every record I could find on that wing. No mention of a remodel, no maintenance request, no permit to seal off any room. I even dug through incident logs and security reports. Nothing. But I did find one thing, an old, faded floor census from 2011, scribbled. At the bottom, in what looked like pencil, was a single line. 609. Patient transferred without discharge. Room closed, 3:42 a.m. No name, no initials, no one signed it. Just that line. I tried to ask around quietly. Old nurses, janitors, even a retired floor manager I still had in my phone. Most of them brushed it off. Said they didn't remember a room 609 or that the 6th floor was weird but harmless. One of them, A nurse named Helen, who'd worked nights with me back in 2012, paused when I mentioned the room. "I thought that room was condemned," she said, her brow furrowing. "Wasn't there, I don't know, a fire or maybe a patient death? Something happened, we stopped using it, then it just wasn't there anymore." She couldn't remember specifics, just a heavy feeling, something about a young man with no name in the system, something about no one ever seeing him leave. That was the last conversation I had about it. Helen passed away 6 months later. Car accident. No warning. Sometimes I wonder if she remembered too much. I've been back to the 6th floor since then. Not often, but sometimes the quiet gets to me and I need to know it's still there. The blank wall hasn't changed, but occasionally I feel it again. That cold spot. That pressure in the air. Like the room still exists, just behind something thinner than drywall. A membrane between what we know and what we're not supposed to. The Mandela Effect. That's what people call it online. Everyone remembers something that never happened. A logo, a line in a movie, the spelling of a name. But in here, inside this hospital, it feels more personal, like the building itself forgets and takes reality down with it. I don't talk about room 609 anymore. But every now and then, when I'm reviewing logs from the 6th floor, something strange happens. The patient count jumps by 1, just for a second. 1 more occupied room than should be there. Always for just a moment, then it vanishes. And for a split second, the number 609 flickers onto my screen, like a ghost breathing through the wires, like it's still there, waiting to be remembered. The hardest part about working in hospital records isn't the night shifts or the constant backlog, it's the death files. They're quiet, clinical, and final. You learn not to read them too closely, not because they're gruesome, though some are, but because they start to blur together. Page after page of life's final chapter, stamped and filed away like they meant nothing. But sometimes, one name sticks with you. Gerald Whitmore, elderly male, 78. Brought in with chest pain, stable for 2 days, coded unexpectedly at 4:12 a.m. in room 311. I remember this case clearly because the nurse on duty that night had worked with me for years. Lena. She was shaken afterward, said Mr. Whitmore had grabbed her hand right before coding and whispered, "Not yet. You already saw me go." At the time, we chalked it up to confusion. Hallucinations aren't rare in cardiac patients. But it stayed with her. Stayed with me, too. I filed his death record personally. Completed, signed, archived. 2 weeks later, I was running a routine review of new admissions when the name popped up again. Gerald Whitmore. Same birth date, same emergency contact, same insurance info, but this time he was listed in room 311 again. Same room, new check-in date. At first I thought it had to be a data entry error, maybe a duplicate profile. It happens sometimes. 2 patients with the same name, wrong MRN copied, but when I pulled up the scanned ID, my stomach dropped. It was him. Same photo, same tired eyes, even the scar on his left cheek barely visible. It was the same man I had filed a death certificate for. I checked the death file, still archived, still signed, still time-stamped, all official. But now, he was alive again, admitted, stable condition, and no one, not even the doctor listed on both records, seemed to notice the overlap. And to believe it was a clerical glitch, a recycled file, anything. But deep down, I already knew something was deeply wrong. The second time Gerald Whitmore was admitted, I went to see him myself. I know that's not part of my job. I'm not clinical staff, and I don't make it a habit to bother patients, but I needed to see him with my own eyes. Room 311 was dimly lit, curtains half drawn. He was sitting up in bed, flipping slowly through an old magazine, IV in his arm, heart monitor clicking steadily beside him. He looked at me as I entered, and for a moment, I froze. It was him. Every detail, the silver gray hair combed back, the mole beneath his eye, the way his fingers twitched when he was thinking, there was no mistake. But it wasn't just his face that stopped me, it was the expression in his eyes. Recognition. "Back again?" he said with a little smile. "Didn't expect to see you so soon." My throat dried up. "Have we met before?" He nodded slowly. "You came by after the first time, told me everything was in order." I hadn't, not in this timeline, not in this version of things. "What do you remember about your last visit?" I asked, trying to stay calm. He frowned as if searching through a fog. "I remember pain, then cold, like I was underwater. I saw my wife, but she's been gone 20 years. Then I woke up, and you were there." I didn't know what to say. His chart showed no signs of confusion, no dementia, no neurological issues, but he remembered a visit I'd never made. Or maybe had made, but no longer had. I returned to my office and pulled both files again, the old death record and the current admittance. Both were active, both real. There was no version where one canceled the other out. I flagged it, of course, escalated it to IT, to admissions, even to the attending physician. No one found anything wrong. And the next morning, Gerald Whitmore was dead again. Code blue, 4:12 a.m., same time, same room, a perfect replica of his first death, down to the minute. The second time I filed Gerald Whitmore's death record, my hands shook. Same time, same place, same cause. The attending physician even signed it with the exact same pen stroke, the same slight smear on the R in his signature. I checked it against the first version, side by side. They were identical, like someone had copied and pasted the moment into the hospital's reality. Except no one remembered the first time. Not the nurse who'd been traumatized by his last words, not Lena. When I asked her about Mr. Whitmore's death from 2 weeks prior, she looked confused. He just came in this week, she said. He coded once, just last night. I was on shift. She remembered him dying only once, but I remembered twice. And worse, when I went to check the original death file, the one I had printed and filed away myself, it was gone. The file cabinet slot where it should have been was empty. The backup scan had vanished from the drive. Only the second version remained. I tried to explain it to my supervisor, but the more I talked, the more I sounded insane. The hospital system had no record of a previous death. Only this one. Just one clean death. One clean chart. Tidy. Neat. But I remembered everything. His last words. His hands. The way the ECG flatlined before he let go. Sometimes I think about what he said the first time. Not yet. You already saw me go. It was like he'd known he was being repeated, reset. Like his death was caught in a loop, stuck between versions of the world only a few of us could still remember. The Mandela Effect, people say, is just misremembering. Collective false memory, a trick of the mind. But that doesn't explain why I still have a copy of his original intake form from 2 weeks before the second one, in a folder I never reported missing. It's dated, signed, real, and it's not supposed to exist, just like Gerald Whitmore. Twice dead, but somehow never gone. Most of my job involves repetition, inputting data, verifying discharge codes, scanning handwritten notes into the system that no one will read unless there's a lawsuit. It's easy to get numb to the flow of names and numbers. That's the trick to surviving in records. Don't attach meaning. Just process and move on. But sometimes, your hands move faster than your brain, and then something slips through. It was a slow Tuesday night. Rain tapped steadily against the archive windows. I was transcribing handwritten notes from post-op reports into the system. Nothing exciting. Just a stack of surgical logs from the day shift. Standard routine, patient ID, procedure code, attending surgeon, anesthesiologist, outcome, comments. The usual. I reached the last report in the stack. The handwriting was messy, almost like it had been written in a rush, but I was used to decoding worse. As I typed, I got ahead of myself, muscle memory filling in blanks as I read. No different than any other night. Until I got to the patient's name. I typed it without reading it, just flowing with the rhythm of the notes. Then I paused. The name on the screen read, Eva M. Calderon. I froze, because I knew, with absolute certainty, that I had never read that name on the report. I went back and looked at the handwritten form. No name. It had been left blank. No label, no patient sticker, nothing identifying who the surgery was for. But I had typed a full name, first, middle initial, last, as if I had seen it, clear as day, and committed it to the record. I sat back in my chair confused, more than confused, uneasy. My skin prickled, and I felt suddenly too aware of how quiet the room was. I looked up the name in the hospital database. Nothing came up. No Eva M. Calderon had been admitted. Not that day. Not ever. I deleted the name from the log, assuming it was a mental slip. Too much coffee, too little sleep. But 2 days later, a woman was admitted to the ER. Name, Eva M. Calderon. She came in at 11:46 p.m., 2 nights after I'd typed her name into a form that didn't have one. Eva M. Calderon, 26 years old, motor vehicle accident, severe internal trauma. They rushed her into surgery before she even had a proper room. The trauma team was already prepped, almost like they were expecting her. When I saw her name on the intake screen, I felt like the floor shifted underneath me. I pulled her file. It was her. Not someone with the same name, not a coincidence. Her photo, her birth date, even her emergency contact matched the form I'd accidentally created. But here's the part that shook me the most. She was being treated in the exact same OR, operating room 3B, as the unnamed post-op report I'd been transcribing 2 days earlier. Same surgeon, same anesthesiologist, same estimated procedure time. It was like the surgery had already happened, and I'd recorded it before she even arrived. I felt sick. I printed out my copy of the log, the one where I'd first typed her name by accident. I brought it to my supervisor. "Where did you get this?" she asked. I told her the truth. I typed the name before the patient existed, before she was even admitted. She didn't believe me. Who would? She told me to go home early, get some rest. "You're probably confusing two patients," she said. "That happens when you see hundreds of names a week." But I know what I saw. I know what I typed. Eva didn't survive the surgery. Massive internal bleeding. Time of death, 2:07 a.m. I stayed late. I needed to see the final file, to know it was real. At 3:15 a.m., the system updated automatically. Her record locked into the archives. But when I checked the access log, something caught my eye. The file had been opened once before, 2 days earlier, by me. Time-stamped at the exact moment I typed her name into the system for the first time, on a Form T. Hat didn't even have her listed, like I'd remembered something I hadn't lived yet. For weeks after Eva's death, I kept replaying that night in my head. Her name had come to me like a whisper I didn't realize I'd heard, as natural as breathing. It didn't feel like a guess or a coincidence. It felt remembered. I stopped mentioning it to anyone. They already looked at me differently, like I was slipping. But I knew what I'd seen, what I'd typed. I kept the printed version of the log with the original timestamp, just in case. I locked it in my bottom drawer, under other files no one else ever asks for. Sometimes I take it out and stare at the date, the time, my own login ID confirming I accessed a file that hadn't existed yet. The Mandela Effect is supposed to be about small things, cartoon names, movie quotes, cereal boxes. But this wasn't harmless nostalgia or mass confusion. This was real. A life, a death, a record written before the event itself, like a ripple backward through time, curling around me. I started noticing other things too, other names I didn't recognize that suddenly appeared days later. Medical notes I swear I didn't type, but they're in my login history. Dreams that match surgical outcomes. It's not all the time, it's not even predictable. But when it happens, I know it. It's like deja vu, but colder, heavier, like touching something that shouldn't exist yet. And sometimes, I wonder if this job is doing something to me, or maybe I was always this way, and the hospital just amplifies it. Maybe all the pain and death and chaos leaves imprints, loose threads from other versions of the world that occasionally catch on mine. I still don't know who Eva was beyond her file. No family ever came to claim the body. No obituary ever ran. Her contact number never returned calls. It's like she appeared for one moment, one version, and then vanished. But I remember her, even if no one else ever will. There's a locked cabinet in the back of the records room. We don't use it anymore, not since everything went digital, but it's still there, bolted to the wall, its paint peeling and hinges squeaky with rust. We keep old physical charts in there, just in case. Most of them are from a time before I even started working here. One night during a graveyard shift, the system was down for maintenance. That meant all lookups had to be done manually. I hated those nights. The dim emergency lighting in the hallways, the humming of the servers going quiet. It makes everything feel like the world's holding its breath. A nurse came down around 2:30 a.m., panicked. A patient had just coded on the 4th floor, and they needed to access her old records immediately. Apparently, she'd been admitted years before. Same symptoms, same issue. She said her name was Marie Ellis. That name didn't ring a bell. And I've got a near photographic memory when it comes to files. I've seen thousands of charts over the years, but that one didn't sound familiar at all. Still, I checked the system. Nothing. Not under that name, not even variations. The nurse insisted. She was sure the doctor had seen a file before, that Marie had been admitted for the same cardiac anomaly almost 10 years back. So I went to the cabinet. I hadn't opened that thing in over 5 years. I had to find the old key buried in the desk drawer. It took some force, but the lock gave way. Inside was a dusty set of binders and hanging folders, all marked by year. I pulled the one labeled 2015 and flipped through it slowly, half thinking this was a wild goose chase. and then I saw it. Chart number 517, Ellis Marie. Her handwriting, old EKG results. Admission date, October 22nd, 2015. Everything matched. But that wasn't what froze me. What did was the bright red tag attached to the chart. Destroyed, do not archive. I stared at that. Red tag longer than I should have. Destroyed, do not archive. It wasn't just a warning, it was a command, one that meant this chart shouldn't exist. Charts marked like that are shredded after 7 years. Gone. Wiped. Not sitting in a dusty cabinet waiting to be found. I should have taken it up front immediately. But I couldn't. Not yet. I skimmed through it instead, heart hammering in my chest. The patient's details were clear. Marie Ellis. Same birth date as the woman they were working on upstairs. Her photo was stapled to the back page. I held it under the dim light. Same face. No doubt in my mind. The note section chilled me. It said she had collapsed during a dinner party, was revived after 5 minutes, and reported bizarre after effects, vivid déjà vu, repeating dreams and memories of events that hadn't happened. The attending physician had written, "Patient seems confused about real events. Reports seeing staff that do not exist. Chart marked for psych eval." But there was a final note dated 3 days after her discharge. Patient returned to ED, claimed to have reset. Staff report she was never readmitted. I didn't understand what that meant. Returned but never readmitted? That's when the lights flickered. I jerked upright, chart in hand, and stepped back. Something felt off. The silence of the hospital had taken on a weight I can't describe, like I was being watched through the walls. I started walking the chart up to the nurses' station on 4th. I took the stairs. Elevators felt wrong. As I reached the top floor, I passed a room that made me stop cold. Room 403. The door was open just a crack, and inside, I saw Marie. Not hooked up to anything, not surrounded by staff, just sitting upright in the dark, staring out the window. Same face, same nightgown, same Marie. She turned her head just slightly, like she knew I was watching, and she smiled. Not at me, but like she'd been waiting. I stood there for what felt like minutes, maybe longer. I didn't breathe, didn't move, just stared into that dim room at Marie, frozen in that impossible moment. I blinked, just once, and the room was empty. No figure, no bed, nothing. Just an unlit, unassigned room with plastic still covering the floors and no chart outside the door. No signs of anyone having been there, like the hospital had skipped over it somehow or forgotten it existed. I walked slowly to the nurse's station, barely aware of my feet hitting the floor. When I handed over the chart, the tech on duty looked at it, squinted, then frowned. "Where'd you get this?" "File room, basement, box B17, I said quietly. He turned the chart over, flipping through it. "This chart's not in our system," he said. "It's not coded, doesn't have a bar scan, it's like it never existed." He reached for the phone to call records, but I stopped him. I don't know why. Something told me not to. Like the moment I tried to officially acknowledge it, something worse would unfold. Instead, I took it back. I said I'd bring it to admin in the morning, but I didn't. I brought it home, and the next morning the chart was gone. Not misplaced, not moved, gone, like it had never been in my bag at all. But that wasn't the worst part. The next time I worked the night shift, I passed room 403 again. It was still dark, still sealed, still unassigned. But now, every time I walk past it, I get this tight, breathless feeling, like I've forgotten something important, like I've lived this night before, like I'm looping. And sometimes, too, when I catch a glimpse of my reflection in the hallway glass, it blinks a second too late, a half beat out of sync. They say the Mandela Effect is just mass misremembering, that people forget logos or line changes or movie scenes and invent new ones. But what if we're not remembering wrong? What if we're remembering another version, one that was real for just long enough to leave a trace? Back in 2013, I transferred to the geriatric wing after nearly a decade in trauma. I thought the pace would be slower, the stress more manageable, but I quickly learned that dying slowly under fluorescent lights had its own kind of weight. The wing itself was tucked into the far end of the hospital, 3 stories up, long halls, no windows that opened. The lights always buzzed just slightly overhead. The whole place had a strange stillness, even in daylight, like... Back in 2013, I transferred to the geriatric wing after nearly a decade in trauma. I thought the pace would be slower, the stress more manageable, but I quickly learned that dying slowly under fluorescent lights had its own kind of weight. The wing itself was tucked into the far end of the hospital, 3 stories up, long halls, no windows that opened. The lights always buzzed just slightly overhead. The whole place had a strange stillness, even in daylight, like it existed just a breath outside of time. The patients came in knowing they wouldn't leave, and the staff, well, you could see it in their eyes. Most of us didn't last long up there. But one woman had. Her name was Lydia Marsh. She'd worked the geriatric night shift for nearly 25 years. People said she was like part of the building, quiet, efficient, invisible. She had a way of showing up before you realized you needed her. Patients calmed around her. Families trusted her without question. You'd hear her humming sometimes from the far end of the hall before you even saw her. But I never actually met Lydia, not while she was alive anyway. She died 6 months before I joined the unit. Brain aneurysm. Quick, sudden. They found her collapsed in the break room between rounds. They buried her in her scrubs. The odd thing was, nobody talked about her like she was gone. The other nurses still referred to her in the present tense. Lydia always stocks these, or, leave that for Lydia, she's quicker with the med carts. I thought it was just habit at first, residual routine, but it never faded. One night, about a month into my new post, I had to cover the 11 p.m. med round alone. I was running late and the halls were darker than usual. As I approached room 316, I heard soft humming. It was a tune I'd never heard before. Slow, lilting, and very close. Room 316 had belonged to Mr. Danner, a quiet mate. And with late-stage Alzheimer's, who barely spoke, he often stared at corners, sometimes muttering things under his breath, but mostly he just slept. That night, his door was ajar. As I pushed it open, the humming stopped. He was awake, eyes wide, fixed on the chair in the corner of the room. I followed his gaze, but there was nothing there. Just the usual visitor chair, empty. I already got my meds, he said suddenly. I paused, startled. Mr. Danner, I haven't been in yet tonight. He shook his head very slowly. She was just here. She always comes first. That's when I noticed the med cup on the bedside tray, 2 pills inside, identical to what he was prescribed, still dry, untouched. The cup was dated, today's date, but with Lydia's initials. I stared at it. I'd seen her initials before. In the old logs they still kept in a dusty binder on the supply cart. The other nurses used them as shorthand, a leftover habit from before she passed. But no one had used that binder in years. We logged everything digitally now. I radioed downstairs to ask if anyone had prepped the 11 p.m. meds early. No one had. My stomach turned. When I turned back to the room, the chair was slightly turned, facing the bed now. I couldn't swear it had moved, but I also couldn't swear it hadn't. Mr. Danner spoke again, barely above a whisper. She says you're kind, but too loud. She likes quiet. I backed out of the room, taking the med cup with me. Back at the station, I checked the digital logs. No entries under Lydia's name, obviously. But something else was there. A new file, time-stamped 5 minutes before I entered the room. It was empty. Just her initials in the header, like she'd started it, then stopped. I didn't finish my round that night. I sat in the break room until morning, lights full on, staring at that med cup. I kept that med cup. I couldn't explain why. Maybe part of me needed physical proof that something had happened, that I hadn't imagined it. I kept it in my locker in a little zip bag, tucked behind my extra socks and granola bars. I checked it every so often, and every time, it was still there. Same date, same pills. Lydia's initials, clear as day. About a week after the incident, I casually brought her up during a lull in the nurses' station. No accusations, just nostalgia. Lydia used to cover this wing, right? I asked. One of the older nurses, Ramona, glanced up from her charting and gave a tired smile. Yeah, back when they still did paper logs. Did you know her well? She paused, thoughtful. I was on the shift when she died. Massive stroke. Right after her rounds, they said she went back into one of the rooms to check on a patient. No one ever said which one. Ramona's voice dropped a little. They didn't find her until hours later. She was sitting in the visitor chair, just sitting, like she was waiting for something. The chill that ran through me was deeper than cold. That was exactly how Mr. Danner's chair had been positioned, facing the bed, watching. I never went back into room 316 alone after that, not because anything else happened, but because something had already happened, and I couldn't shake the feeling that if I stayed too long, if I lingered in the wrong corner at the wrong time, I might see her, or worse, she might see me. Mr. Danner passed away a month later. The new patient assigned to 3-on-16 refused to sleep in the bed, said it was too close to the chair. I never told her anything, didn't have to. Sometimes when I walk the halls after midnight, I catch movement in my peripheral vision. Just ahead, just out of reach. A blur of scrubs, soft humming. I turn corners fast, but there's never anyone there. But I know who it is. Some nurses go home. Some just never clock out. Room 2B was tucked away at the far end of the maternity ward, near a storage closet that was almost always locked. It wasn't an isolation room, but we didn't use it much. Some nurses said it was too drafty. Others claimed the call button acted up. Truth is, we avoided it when we could. No one ever said it outright, but we all knew something was off about that room. I was floated to maternity one weekend. Short staff as usual. It was supposed to be an easy overnight. A couple of newborns in observation, 2 recovering C-sections, and 1 empty room, 2B. I passed by it during my first rounds, just after 11 p.m. The light was on, which was odd because the room was listed as unoccupied. I peeked inside. Empty. Neatly made bed. No equipment in use. But there were sounds, soft ones. A rhythmic creaking, like a rocking chair. A woman humming, low and tuneless. I assumed maybe housekeeping had left the light on and the TV running, but when I stepped inside, the noise stopped. Completely. No humming, no creaking, just the buzz of the overhead light. Still, I turned the TV off, flipped the switch, and closed the door behind me. An hour later, the call button for 2B lit up. That should have been impossible. I buzzed in over the intercom, standard procedure. "This is Nurse Talib, can I help you?" There was no answer, just faint static. The light blinked off a second later on its own. I walked down there again, just to be safe. I opened the door to silence and darkness, and this time I could smell something, baby powder, thick and sudden, the kind you used to find in older nurseries, the stuff hospitals had phased out years ago. I stepped in and turned on the light. Again the room looked untouched, but I noticed the rocking chair in the corner, the one no one ever used, was slightly turned toward the bed now and still gently swaying. Didn't report anything, just logged my rounds, kept quiet, and told myself it was the air vents. But the next time I passed by 2B, the door was open again. Around 2:30 a.m., I was making my rounds again when the same call light for 2B blinked on. This time, the intercom didn't even activate. It was just the light, pulsing softly on the board like a heartbeat. My stomach twisted. The hallway was empty. The whole wing had gone unusually silent, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. I reached the room and stood in the doorway for a few seconds before going in. I didn't want to. Every instinct I had said to leave it alone. But I stepped inside. The smell was back, stronger this time. Baby powder and something else. Iron-like. Not blood exactly. More like the scent of old coins. And the air was freezing. Not hospital cold. Something deeper. Like a cellar. And there, sitting in the rocking chair, was a woman. She was holding something wrapped in a hospital blanket. Her gown looked dated, like a uniform from decades ago. She rocked slowly, humming again, that same tuneless lullaby. Her face was turned slightly downward, cradling the bundle in her arms. I couldn't speak at first. My mind just froze. I didn't even feel afraid yet, just confused, disoriented. I thought maybe I was walking into a scenario that had just failed to get logged. Maybe a grieving mother, a psych eval patient. But there were no entries. 2B was empty, had been all day. I stepped closer just enough to see her face. It was wrong. Familiar. Like someone I'd met before, but aged in a way that didn't make sense. Her features were blurred at the edges, like a memory I couldn't quite recall. The baby in her arms wasn't moving. It looked too still. I finally managed to say, "Ma'am, are you all right?" She didn't answer. She just looked up slowly and said, "They don't remember us anymore." Then the light flickered once, and she was gone. Just gone. Chair still rocking. Blanket dropped to the floor. Empty. The room looked exactly as it had before. I stood there for a full minute, then quietly picked up the blanket and left. I didn't tell anyone what I saw that night. Not because I was afraid they'd call me crazy, although I guess that too, but because I wasn't even sure what I saw. It felt less like a ghost story and more like I'd witnessed something slip out of place, like time had folded just for a moment. The blanket I picked up was real. I kept it in my locker for weeks. It smelled faintly of baby powder for days, even after I washed it. I told myself maybe it was an old patient's item someone forgot, but I knew it wasn't. The hospital stopped using that particular brand of receiving blankets years ago. This one had the old green stripes. discontinued long before I transferred to this wing. A week later, I was doing patient notes and came across a name in the database that stopped me cold. Eileen Moore, deceased 1974, infant stillborn, room 2B. The mother had died in the hospital 3 days after losing her baby, supposedly from grief complications. I checked the old records, grainy black and white scans from a time before electronic charts. The woman's face, it was her. The same one I saw rocking that blanket. But here's what really made my stomach turn. Under next of kin, someone had handwritten, no living relatives, no visitors recorded. No one ever came for her, no one remembered her, she was just erased. After that night, room 2B stopped staying empty. We had a string of patients in there who complained of strange dreams. Some said they heard a woman humming in the corner. Others said they woke up and saw a figure holding a baby by the window. Maintenance finally reported electrical issues in that room. Lights flickered, call button jammed. They sealed the room for renovation a few months later. But it's still there. I pass it sometimes, even now, years later, and I swear, sometimes I smell that powdery scent again, just faintly, like someone is still waiting inside, hoping to be remembered. There's a hallway in the East Wing that never sees daylight. Even though it was part of the original hospital build back in the 1950s, it's now barely used. Just a few old storage rooms, a locked med archive, and an out-of-service elevator that hasn't worked since I started here. I only go down there when I absolutely have to, usually during night shifts when someone forgets to log out meds or there's a misfiled chart. The lights are dimmer than the rest of the floor, and the tiles are mismatched from decades of poor repairs. It smells like stale air and peeling lead paint. I first noticed something odd there a few years ago. Every time I walked down that hall, I'd feel a weird tug of anxiety, like I was being watched. Not just watched, studied. It wasn't just me. A few other nurses used to complain about it too. One called it the pressure hall, like the air thickened when you entered. Another refused to walk it alone after 10 p.m. One night, I had to deliver a locked bin to the med archive. It was around 2:00 a.m. and the floor was quiet. I remember the elevator dinging, even though I hadn't called it. The door opened and nothing was inside, just pitch black. That elevator hasn't been functional in years. I told myself it was a power fluke. But that same night when I walked down the hallway, I noticed something new. At the far end past the last storage door, there was a man standing under the emergency light. Just standing there, still as stone. Dressed in outdated scrubs, solid white like the kind orderlies wore in the 70s. I thought maybe it was a patient or staff member who had wandered over, confused. But when I called out to him, he didn't move, didn't even blink. I turned to grab my flashlight, and when I looked back, he was gone. Just like that, no footsteps, no sound, nothing but that eerie, charged silence. After that night, I avoided the East Wing as much as possible. But a week later, during a double shift, I got paged for a records pull from the old med archive. No one else was available. I told myself the man I saw was probably a trick of the light, lack of sleep, hallucination. Still, I brought someone with me this time, Rita, a newer nurse. She joked a lot and didn't take anything seriously, so I figured her company would help me shake the nerves. As we walked the hall, I kept stealing glances down toward the end. Nothing. Just that same cold stretch of tile and buzzing lights. We unlocked the archive room, went in and started flipping through files. While we were in there, I heard something. Barefoot steps. Slap, slap, slap on the hallway tile. I looked at Rita. She was frozen, holding a folder midair. "You heard that, right?" I whispered. She nodded. "Someone's out there." I peeked through the cracked door, and there he was. The same man, same white scrubs, but this time he was walking toward us. Not fast, not slow, just steady, purposeful. "Hey!" I shouted, trying to sound authoritative. "This area's off limits. Are you lost?" He didn't respond, didn't even acknowledge us. His face looked wrong, like it was out of focus, too smooth, too empty. And then he turned left and disappeared into the elevator. Except the doors hadn't opened. He just walked through them like smoke. Rita and I rushed out, practically ran back to the main station. She was pale, shaken. She kept asking me if I saw his feet, if I noticed how he wasn't leaving any sound this time. The hospital confirmed again that the elevator hasn't worked in years. No motion sensors tripped, no camera footage, nothing. But Rita refused to go near that wing ever again. A month later, she transferred floors, and I started keeping track of when that man appeared. After that night with Rita, something shifted. I stopped pretending the man at the end of the hall was a fluke. I started logging every sighting in a little notebook I kept in my locker. Date, time, who was on shift, where he appeared. The pattern wasn't immediate, but eventually one began to emerge. He always showed up within 24 hours of a death in the hospital, but not after the death, before it. Like a signal, like a warning. And it wasn't just me seeing him. I overheard staff whispering about a man in white walking where no one should be. A few times, patients described him in eerie detail just before they passed. He came to my door last night, one woman told me, said I wouldn't feel a thing. One night I was sitting at the nurse's station watching monitors, and I saw him again, standing perfectly still at the end of the east wing. The moment I looked directly at him, the call light lit up in room 243. Mr. Penner, stable, no major conditions, had just coded. We couldn't bring him back. That's when I stopped logging the sightings. It felt disrespectful, like treating death as a statistic, and deep down I was afraid I'd start expecting people to die once I saw him, or worse, stop trying to save them. I've seen him nearly a dozen times now. Always at the edge of a long hallway, always in white, always calm. Sometimes I wonder if he's real at all, or if he's something we've collectively conjured out of dread, guilt, and exhaustion, an embodiment of inevitability. But other times, I think he's always been here, a part of this place, a shadow that stretches just a little too far. I've stopped trying to explain it. I just chart, care, and wait. And every so often I glance toward the end of that long, dim hall, bracing myself for that familiar, impossible figure, waiting for him to tell me someone else is next.